Hey sports card fans, it's John, Wade Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. When it comes to getting vintage baseball cards graded or purchasing already graded vintage baseball cards, there are various options available to you. Of course, you have PSA, you have SGC, you have Beckett, you have CSG, you have HGA, even some of the other newer grading companies. While currently I believe they're just focused on grading modern cards, they eventually may get into grading vintage cards as well. So lots of different options. But in this video, I want to talk about why personally I choose to collect only PSA graded vintage baseball cards. Now, before I get into the positive reasons why I choose PSA, I do want to say that I haven't drunk the PSA Kool-Aid. I don't think they're necessarily the greatest out there in all aspects, but overall, the positives for me outweigh the negatives. But I do want to mention some of the negatives, the things I have issues with PSA. And the first one is the cost to get cards graded. Now, it's been a very long time since I have actually sent in any cards to PSA to get graded. So I mainly have been purchasing cards already graded by PSA. Now, if you've been following my channel, you know that I have several vintage baseball cards that are currently in BVG holders that I eventually want to switch over to PSA. And that's going to be a lot more expensive than if I were to go with, say, SGC, or obviously keep them in Beckett holders, which I'm not interested in, or some of the other grading companies. And so the cost factor is a negative to PSA. Regarding the cost as well, it's not just the higher initial cost. Their business model, for as long as I can remember, and maybe forever, they charge more for a card the more valuable the card is. That just never made any sense to me. To me, they get a card, they look at the 4 factors of grading. You have the corners, the edges, the surface, and the centering. To me, that process shouldn't matter whether you're submitting a card that's worth $5, $500, or $5,000. But for whatever reason, PSA charges more to get a higher value card graded than a lower value card. Just doesn't make sense to me. And then if you submit a card to get graded and you're trying to be conservative as to what the value is, and the card gets a higher grade that you think, which means it would be worth more, PSA could come back and say, hey, we're upcharging you because the card is now worth a lot more than what you thought it was going to be. So in order to get your card back, you have to give us more money. So again, that's one of the reasons why I haven't submitted a lot of cards to PSA. I don't have a lot of ungraded cards to grade. Again, right now, the only cards that I would think or consider sending into PSA, besides maybe a handful of ones, are those ones that are in Beckett BVG holders that I would want to get switched over. So definitely someone who's budget and cost conscious with the hobby, that's definitely a negative for me, having to pay more for to get a card graded with PSA. Another negative is the current turnaround time at PSA. A lot of collectors out there I'm seeing are choosing to go with SGC because their turnaround time is a lot faster. Me, I don't really like the fact that if I do submit a card, it could be with PSA for several months as opposed to maybe a week or two. I'm seeing SGC turn these around. I don't know enough about Beckett or CSG, HGA, some of those other ones. I haven't watched too many videos on some of those reveal videos and how long it's taken to get those cards back. But With PSA, it definitely takes a lot longer to get your card back. Finally, in terms of the secondary market, so again, I purchased most of my cards already slabbed in PSA holders, and those cards are more expensive than their counterpart in a similar grade in, say, SGC or Beckett holders, and so on. Now, I think the secondary market value between PSA and SGC is narrowing. I think that gap is getting closer to where SGC values are getting close to PSA, but still, you are going to pay a premium currently. It may not be much, but there is a premium for a card in a PSA slab versus SGC, and especially Beckett and some of the others. So again, with budget in mind, you would think that I would want to go with, say, SGC cards because I'd be saving money. But at the end of the day, it's still PSA for me. All right, so those are some of the negatives. Let me go into some of the positives of of the reasons why I choose PSA over the other grading companies. The first is the flip side. I may be paying more for a card in a PSA holder than an SGC holder, but if I ever were to sell any of my cards, if I had to sell them for whatever reason, or when I'm gone and my son gets my collection, if he were to go to sell them, at least currently, he'd be able to get more for those cards than if they were in another slab. Now again, who knows, 10, 15, 20 years, whether SGC will become equal with PSA, it's yet to be seen. But currently, if you have a card in a PSA holder, you're going to get a little bit more for it than a similar grade SGC or definitely Beckett and some of the others. The other thing, and again, this is just a personal choice, I happen to like the PSA slabs, the labels, the feel of the slab. SGC, it's a little bit larger slab, and the label itself, just the black and white, doesn't really do anything for me. Now, the tuxedo look, I have to admit, in a lot of cases, it does make a vintage card pop as opposed to the clear case of PSA. But it has the occasional downside. Case in point, 1971 Topps cards with the black border and that tuxedo black frame. The card blends into the border, and it just doesn't stand out as much as maybe some of the other vintage cards. So every once in a while, I look at a SGC slab and say, wow, that card looks great in that slab. Overall, I personally like the PSA slab better in terms of the presentation, the look, the feel of just holding the card. Definitely more than Beckett. With CSG, the slabs that I've seen, I don't know, the labels seem a bit large and take up more of the space. HGA, I think they're the ones that may have more of the colorful labels and things like that. I don't want that to distract from the vintage card itself in terms of me looking at it. So again, this is just a personal choice. I happen to like the PSA label and slab better than some of the other grading companies. The third reason why I choose PSA is that currently there's a lot more supply of PSA graded cards than SGC and Beckett and some of the others. Now, I don't go to a lot of card shows. Mainly, I've been going to the National. And it seems every year that I go to the National, I see more and more display cases with SGC cards. But I think all in all, whether it be at shows, definitely on eBay, if you go to search for a card, there'll probably be more examples of PSA graded copies for sale then SGC, and then definitely more than Beckett and CSG, HGA, and so on. So just for the sheer volume of cards out there, um, there's more to pick up through PSA, and so that's another reason why I choose them. And finally, again, this is another personal reason. It's just the uniformity of my collection. There's just something with me. I know others don't mind having a Frankenstein collection where they have some PSA, even some BVG holders, some SGC holders, just a hodgepodge, and it doesn't matter to them. They have a card and they want a graded card as opposed to ungraded in their collection, and it doesn't matter to them which card company the card is slabbed in. But to me, since I started off with PSA, I want to keep everything else PSA. It's not so much the registry. So I know SGC now, I believe, has come out with its own registry. I think HGA has a registry. I'm not sure about CSG or Beckett on whether they've started their own registries. I mainly use the PSA registry as more of like a checklist. I'm not really into necessarily completing sets for the registry itself and see where I rank. I don't really care about any rankings or anything like that, because I'm not looking to collect really high grade copies to rank high on a particular registry set. I just use it as more of a checklist of what cards, either of a particular player or Hall of Famers of a particular year, and that's what I base my collecting goals off of. If I happen to complete a registry set like I have for Corey Yastrzemski, okay, great, fine. I think I'm ranked on one of the Corey Yastrzemski registry lists at like number 50. So that really doesn't matter to me. It's not really the registry, but it's the uniformity in my collection, having everything graded PSA. I'm not quite there yet with all those BVG cards, but hopefully eventually I'll get everything in PSA slabs. So there you have it, my personal reasons on why I choose to go with PSA when purchasing, or in the future if I ever would go to submit cards to get graded, why I choose PSA over SGC, Beckett, CSG, HGA, and some of the others. Would love to know in the comments, do you have a particular favorite grading company that you use, and why? Is it the look? Is it the cost? Various factors that you may feel are more important than others, which make you choose that other grading company. Do you like to have uniformity in your collection? Do you not care what cards, what grading companies have graded cards in your collection? We'd love to know what your thoughts are in how you build and have your vintage baseball card collection. So with that, that's all I have for you. So until next time, thanks for watching.